Wasabi wallet. I'm fairly private.
What's up, everyone? I'm Ben with the BTC Sessions, and this is your daily session.
Hodl that Bitcoin.
Before we dive in, of course, shout out to sponsors of the show, Ledn.io. Of course, this is who I'm interviewing today, but besides the point, Ledn, they have a variety of different services for which you can utilize your Bitcoin. They've got Bitcoin savings. They have their Bitcoin-backed loans, where if you need to get your hands on dollars, you can do so using your Bitcoin as collateral. And of course, they've got their B2X offering, where you get double the exposure to the price of Bitcoin. Now, we'll get into this during the interview near the end as well, but worth mentioning here. And secondly, we have Rise Wallet. Rise Wallet is a physical gift card that you can pick up near you to gift anybody Bitcoin. The way it works is you pick it up, gift it to somebody. They are instructed on the back of the card to download the paired app and scratch and scan a code. This code then creates them a brand new Bitcoin wallet on their phone and then sends them an on-chain transaction for the face value of the card. It's super idiot proof and it's great for onboarding new users. I've gifted it to a bunch of my friends and they've all had a pretty easy time using it. So if you want to check them out, head over to risewallet.com, click on locations and see where you can pick one up. It's only in Canada right now, but keep your eyes open because they're looking at expanding. And if you can't get one right near you, you can always get it delivered via coincards.ca. With that, let's dive into the show. So today I get to sit down with Mauricio Di Bartolomeo. I've talked to him a bunch of different times on the show. We've talked about, of course, his company Ledn, and then we've also talked about his experiences growing up and having family in Venezuela and the implications of what is going on down there as it relates to, just everybody involved, but also kind of the roots of why he decided to start Ledn. Well, today we get to chat a little bit about building financial infrastructure on Bitcoin and the implications of having a finite digital resource like that, and the necessity for something like proof of reserves, where financial entities should be held to account and take up the practices of proving their reserves when offering services like this to people. It's a fun interview. I had a great time talking with Mauricio and I was very glad to have him back. So I hope you guys enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the BTC Sessions. I've got, I think, my most frequently returning guest, Mauricio Di Bartolomeo from Ledn here. Mauricio, it's good to see you again, man. It's been way, way too long.
It certainly has. It's always a pleasure. And 2020 is it's been a very interesting year, very good Bitcoin price wise. So
Yeah.
we're hoping it continues.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's good to have you back on. I guess those that are unfamiliar with Mauricio, I've done lots of interviews with him in the past. I partnered with Ledn on the show for quite some time now. We were just discussing before we started recording. It's it was early 2019 that we kind of met and then started working together. A lot has happened since then, but Mauricio, for those unfamiliar with you, could you just give a quick kind of summary of who you are, what you're doing, all of that good stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Mauricio. Our company is based in Canada, and I am as well now. However, originally I am from Venezuela. That's where I was born and raised. Most of my family is still down there. So I got into Bitcoin, I think it was late 2014, mining down there. And from then on, I kind of became obsessed about building products that made Bitcoin easier to use and easier to hold for longer for people. And we founded Ledn in 2018. So Ledn is a company that provides tools to help people make the most of their Bitcoin. So we have a savings account where people can earn an interest under Bitcoin. We have Bitcoin-backed loans that give you dollar loans with real-time proof of reserves custody on your Bitcoin. If you need cash, don't want to sell your Bitcoin. And the last product that we launched is B2X, which is essentially a loan that lets you buy more Bitcoin and essentially lets you own double the Bitcoin that you have.
Awesome. So We're going to get into some of the Ledn stuff. One of the things I wanted to chat with you about that pertains to you and Ledn in particular, but it was actually an article you wrote for Bitcoin Magazine, and you're talking about proof of reserves. And so, like proof of reserves you use for the Bitcoin-backed loans and everything. And you kind of got into why you think proof of reserves is so important, namely with something like Bitcoin. So maybe I'll let you touch a little bit on what the article was about.
Yeah, no, happy to chat more about it. It's a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I think it's something that we as industry participants need to be talking more about, which is this the concept of proof of reserves around custody. The whole theme around custody has been a heated debate around the Bitcoin community since the very beginnings. Understanding that this process or movement has its roots in this idea of you being able to verify where your funds are at all times, and there's a public blockchain now that everyone can use to attest these things. I think that is a huge breakthrough, and I think that transparency is a native trait to Bitcoin. It is inherent in the protocol. So I find it a bit concerning that it has taken so long for service providers in the industry to basically incorporate that transparency that is built into the protocol and allow users to verify their own reserves. So this whole concept of not your keys, not your Bitcoin really has been reinforced by this concept of, financial institutions today are these black boxes, that there's just no way for you to attest or check that they're following what they said they would be doing. I think that this Bitcoin is a huge paradigm shift in that it gives way more visibility for people. It can. It's not doing so today because people, most industry participants aren't, putting these features to practice, and they're not basically delivering all that benefit to the end user. We took a very hard, almost obsessive approach to proof of reserves, and we give our users real-time on-chain proof of reserves. And that, to us, technologically, it's a challenge. And yes, from a business standpoint, there are things that you need to do differently in order to provide that. But I think as members of the Bitcoin community, newcomers would be better served if, rather than us discarding this concept of custody altogether, instead nudge them into the right questions to ask for custodial services, the right things that they should be looking out for. Because I think custodial services are a reality, and I think some people are going to choose to use these services. And another reality that we shouldn't, discredit is the fact that custodial services allow different value add services to be created on top of Bitcoin, like our loans. And so it's interesting that, or to me, I think it's the conversation needs to be reframed from don't put your keys in custody to most custodians are not doing things right. Let's make sure that you're going to the ones that are doing things right. And let's make sure that you know which questions to ask as you're evaluating your options. That's really in a nutshell, what I was trying to say in the article.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of people that bring up things around custody. Of course, there's the proof of keys movement, not your keys, not your coins. And you're very right in that it stems from a historical distrust of financial entities from the past, because there was no way to easily audit as an individual if you actually had your money with that institution, right? It was like you were saying, it's a black box, and that was inherent with the money, given that either it, back in the days of storing your gold, you had to trust the auditor, then you moved to fiat paper based. And so even still, with fractional reserve, you weren't quite sure the state of how leveraged that bank was, and you had bank runs. And there was just no easy way to do that. And now with the advent of a purely digital money that is easily trackable online, and as you can now in real time audit, but most don't do that. And so I think because of this historical distrust, the knee-jerk reaction is never custody ever. And I would also say to that people don't have to custody, but some people are going to. Some people are going to want the services associated with that, whether it just be, let's face it, some people aren't going to want to hold their own keys. But also there, things like loans, things like savings, things like other kind of derivative financial instruments. We need to look at how we're going to approach that. Are we going to just blanket say nobody should do that and just assume that's going to be the case? Because it's not. Right. Do we disallow it? Which, most Bitcoiners tend to be pretty libertarian thinking for the most part. Or do we try to make it so that we demand better practices? And stepping back and saying, well, we're not going to stop people from doing it. We're definitely not going to not allow them to do things they want to do with their own money. Maybe that third option is our best one, to try and hold custodians and companies to the utmost highest level of kind of, good practices, and establish what those practices are.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think it's really a question of what is the lesser of all evils, in that, these are realities. And the other thing is, I think it's also, while there are some bad apples in the bunch, I think it's also a mistake to sort of blanket all custodial services as bad or potentially negative. Like, a lot of these custodial services actually allow for more adoption. For example, our loan service allows people that want to hold Bitcoin for longer, but they have a need for cash. In that sense, it allows them to put it in custody, take a loan against it, and they don't put sell pressure on the order book, right? Like that is a huge benefit. And then in addition, a lot of our people end up placing the Bitcoin in custody, taking out a loan, and then they go buy more Bitcoin with it. So that is accretive to the price of Bitcoin. So
well, one of the first things
I think it's important to understand that.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that when I met you and tried out the service, it was one of the first things I did was getting a dollar loan at a point where I needed to kind of get my hands on a little bit of cash. And I was like, oh God, like, is this going to be a terrible time to sell Bitcoin? And that was going to be my choice. It was going to be sell Bitcoin, which was, it was, luckily enough, it was still at a gain at the time, but in doing so, that would have been a taxable event. Or then I met you and kind of learned what you guys were doing, and I said, well, like, I have a job, I have income. It's just that there was kind of this surprise expense that came up. And so I was able to utilize my Bitcoin as collateral to take out a loan. And then when I got the dollars, it still locked in the Bitcoin that I owned. So regardless of what the price did, I still had that Bitcoin sitting there. And yes, it opened me to the risk of, if the price of Bitcoin were to drop, then, I'd either have to top up my collateral or pay back a portion of the loan. But it also prevented what would have happened is the price of Bitcoin shortly after I took out my loan went way up. And had I sold my Bitcoin at that point, I would have likely not been able to reaccumulate the Bitcoin that I had utilized to get the loan if I had sold it. So I definitely see, in a world where, or if where an individual values the total amount of Bitcoin that they're holding, and is mostly worried about losing Satoshis, then that's a tool that somebody can utilize. And so as a, yes, custodial service, it's a service that many might want to utilize at various times.
Yeah, and so, but just to touch on that, even that service, right? Like we provide dollar liquidity for Bitcoin placed in custody with us. It was our first service, and our main service today, actually, is the one people still use the most. We are unique in that when we built this service, I mean, again, on the theme of reserves and don't trust, verify, coming at this from the eyes or the vantage of a Bitcoiner, right? Like I wanted to have every tool at my disposal to use this service so that I could verify what the service provider was telling me. Not that I distrust, but I just would like to be able to verify. I see that as an improvement on status quo financial system. If I'm giving a custodian an asset, they're not really telling me where it is, and they're just going to give me some cash on it. That's really not that different than what we have today. Yeah. And so we wanted to really bring in all the features that are available in Bitcoin and literally relay them to the end users of the service. And so when you, for example, sent a loan or collateral for your loan, you were able to verify that Bitcoin sat on that vault address within BitGo, covered with insurance, and it hasn't moved.
I actually checked it right before we started this interview. I was like, I'm gonna pop on and check that address and make sure and of course, like it's been sitting, the same UTXO has been sitting there since I opened the loan.
Yeah, and that is very important to us. And this is again going to just addressing this point precisely of the questions people don't ask. That is unique. We try to stress as much as possible that we're one of the few companies in the world that do this. What's happening in most cases is those assets that are being placed under custody are being relent, are being, there's things happening in the background to maximize, profit. And again, all of these things that I'm telling you now can be done properly. I'm not trying to say that these are scary things that, every custodial platform that is lending is doing things wrong. That's not the case. There are good players that are being very transparent and showing users where the Bitcoin is at all times. There are services that aren't. And those services essentially, they don't try to compete on transparency. They try to compete on other types of lures like excessive rates or artificially low rates. And people, because they're used to services being very commoditized in the traditional financial system, like a mortgage is a mortgage, credit card's a credit card, like there's very few differences in the systems today. So everyone thinks that every Bitcoin-backed loan is the same. And that could not be further from the truth. There are companies that are transparent and that are very much welcoming to people's desires to verify, and there are companies that work a little bit more obscurely. We think that transparency is the way to go, and that is where we want to go towards. The kind of analogy that I tell people is that I like to think of Ledn as a big glass box, where people can send their assets, see where they're at, feel safe looking at them, and still access our services with the same clarity as much as we can provide as having their own keys would.
Yeah, 100%. And so I guess to talk about the moving into the services of lending away from lending, but rather like the savings and then assets being lent out. So again, these are services that when done in the shadows where people have, placed something in custody and not consented to that and don't realize it's happening, it's something that's outright malicious, I would say. But there are some people that would enter into a contract where they say, hey, like I'm willing to have a third party lend out my Bitcoin if I'm going to get a rate of return for that. and so it comes up to the consumer choice. Is the rate of return a justification for some inherent risk, as with any type of investment? And so it can be done in a transparent way, right?
Yeah, so there is a little more challenge when you're trying to provide proof of reserves around the savings product,
Yeah.
because in order to generate the returns in the savings product, you have to generally lend them out. Now, when you lend them out, they're no longer in your possession. So even if you were to see them on the blockchain, it would almost be misrepresenting where the funds are, because you're not controlling those private keys anymore. So when it comes to lending out the Bitcoin, as far as the savings side of things, the most important thing is really, and this is probably not going to be the greatest answer, but it's the integrity of the operator. Because the operator of those, of that pool will essentially have discretion as to how those funds can be deployed. Now, because business, so I think the way we like to do business, and the only way we do business, is essentially we take collateral from the counterparty that is requiring this Bitcoin. I think that being said, I think the Bitcoin market Bitcoin lending market is evolving very fast, and it is there are, I guess, some players that are doing things right, and I think there are some players that people should be a little more concerned about, because there can be shops out there saying, opening up with registrations in some random place with a random website offering 10% yield on Bitcoin, and people will start sending out those Bitcoins. But what happens when those players start to emerge is that they take that Bitcoin and they desperately start trying to place it, and it taints the borrow market, right? Because right now, and this is fact, you can check this online at loanscan.io, there is a low, you actually have to pay a lower rate. Right now, you could get a Bitcoin loan for 2.5% uncollateralized as a Bitcoin borrower. Needless to say, Ledn is not participating in the Bitcoin lending game right now. And that is something that I think we need to be vocal about, because again, we're saying that these things are happening, and I want to be clear and say that we're not partaking in this high risk game. We prefer much more to either not place them out, just keep them under our custody, and their customers, than to essentially participate and try to play on that race. Like that is a race where we won't go. We're not going to, we won't essentially lend anything if we don't feel comfortable. And right now, I'm saying I don't think that the Bitcoin lending space is necessarily at its healthiest moment. And so I think that it's important that as a user, people are asking these questions and understanding this, because as a Bitcoiner, I look at, the people that are participating in we care about our customers a lot, and we don't want to lose a single sat. That's our main thing. So whenever we see things going in a direction that we don't like, we're going to call it out, and we're going to shift gears.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about the implications of a slew of financial, financial services companies coming out and partaking in some of the services that we're used to, but applying the same amount of kind of like willy-nilly risk that the traditional finance crowd is used to, under the impression that if the traditional finance guys could get away with it, then so can we. It's starkly different, given that in Bitcoin there is no lender of last resort, and there's a very real cost to over leveraging yourself and being irresponsible with customer funds, and which leads me to believe that people partaking in those practices in this space, as opposed to the traditional finance space where they just get a pass and they continue business as usual, the riskier players here, I think, are likely to get shaken out over time, but that also applies to people that are utilizing those riskier players and those higher rates of return. So I'd like, do you have any insight? Do you think that that's the way this is going to go? Some people are going to have to experience that with the less transparent players out there.
I mean, I want to believe that that won't be the case. I want us to do as much as we can as a community so that organically customers understand what questions they need to be asking, and they discern who can offer this and who isn't, and essentially what is a premium product and what isn't a premium product. And are these apples, and am I comparing them to apples, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing, because right now it's the people that are in the obscure side, they're putting out content and information that makes it very hard for that to do. The people on the transparency front, I think it's a battle of two narratives. On the one narrative, you have easy service, great rates, very fast, blah, 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 higher profits. On the other side, you have ask the right questions, be transparent, check where your Bitcoin is, audit things. So it's those voices are very hard to kind of compare and contrast. And I think the voice of reason will win over time. So I don't think it's a coincidence that so many of industry players actually use Ledn. We work with some of the top companies in Canada and North America and really the world, and we work with some of the employees of top companies that get paid in Bitcoin. And I think that tells us that those guys do their homework and they wind up here. And so I think I would love to keep doing more of that. And I would love to keep hearing more people come and say, hey, I love how you guys do proof of reserves. We get that. We get that quite a bit. And people keep coming. I wish that people would understand the risks more. I want to say that this is going to be a slow organic process, but what is likely going to happen is, we saw this year or last year, when Quadrigax went under, it ended up being the greatest. Yeah, it ended out there. Maybe not so much because they were doing great things, but because the Titanic sank and you had all these people on a raft looking for a new boat, and they just, the numbers just went up, right? And so I hope that not see that from Canada anymore. I hope that if things happen, it happens outside. And I would love to see people proactively look for the right choice rather than, reactively have to look for a new home. And that's why I think it's so important that we talk about this.
Yeah, I agree. It's having experience in the space. Most people have begun to recognize that when you see the ones that are making grandiose claims and not encouraging a lot of skepticism and self-verification, they tend to be the riskier directions to go. And when you get somebody saying like, hey, listen, like don't take my word for it, look into it yourself, telling you again, don't trust but verify, those are the people that tend to exude qualities that are going to be better for you as an individual to interact with them over time. So I guess what I'd like to go to now, given that we've kind of discussed your approach and Ledn's approach in contrast with some other entities out there, what else have you been able to build, taking that idea of being careful and conservative and transparent, you're able to do some interesting things and build some interesting products. So obviously you've got the loans, you do the savings, but you launched another product as well recently. It's been out for a little while now, but I'll let you chat about it.
Yeah, definitely. So, on the topic of services that help you hold and accumulate more Bitcoin, what we saw was that many users were coming to our site and they were taking loans out because they wanted to buy more Bitcoin with it. And so, exactly. And so, after seeing that oftentimes and having people, having to wire the funds outside of the platform, then people had to go and buy their Bitcoin and then send them coming back to our platform to get another dollar loan. So what we did is essentially we packaged that up into one new product called B2X. And so what B2X does in a short nutshell is that the Bitcoin that you bring into Ledn, essentially, and you want to apply to the B2X service, what it does is that it lets you double the amount of Bitcoin that you use on the service to one of our loans. So example, let's just say Bitcoin is at $10,000 today. You deposit a Bitcoin, you want to use B2X, you click yes. Another Bitcoin gets purchased, and you essentially end state is you have 2 Bitcoins and a loan for $10,000. And obviously that, if Bitcoin price goes up, that benefits you. If Bitcoin price goes down, that goes against you. But in essence, if you have a long-term view or even a medium or short-term view that Bitcoin is going to increase in price, and you would like to get or feel a larger effect when that happens, then you can use B2X.
So you're essentially doubling kind of your exposure to those price fluctuations, whether it be to the upside or the downside. You get exposed to that. So in the instance of depositing a Bitcoin and essentially obtaining a second Bitcoin with that, and then having that loan there, you're on the hook for the loan,
Right.
which there's your collateral there as well, plus any fees incurred. But if if it goes to the upside, then you essentially are doubling your perceived dollar exposure to that.
Yeah.
And then so can you outline what happens to the downside, and at what point there may be a call for additional collateral? What are the levels that people should look out for there?
Definitely. So on the downside, we our first margin call happens at a drop of 28.5%, approximately 30% from the time you take out the loan. When that happens, we reach out, and we try to reach out actually even before that. And give you the opportunity to deposit additional funds to the vault address if you want to avoid the margin call altogether before it even happens. So once the drop happens and the level gets hit, we email you and call you and essentially say, hey, Ben, on a Bitcoin or repay X amount of dollars. And the first notice, we tell you there's 24 hours. Now, we are understanding, we're human too, we travel too. So whenever a user responds and says, hey, I'm traveling, I don't get access to my private key until tomorrow, can I get another 24 hours? We're very flexible when it comes to that stuff. As long as within our means we can extend, we will, and work with you to kind of get there. That's the process. So far, we've had, several drills of margin call scenario of situations, and we've been nothing but surprised at how smart really our people that use Ledn are, because we contact them and they'll already be, oh yeah, I was expecting your call, don't worry, I'm ready to go, I've been monitoring the price, we're good, don't sell my Bitcoin.
So are you finding that most people are opting to add collateral versus? Okay, yeah.
Overwhelming majority. I mean, our service is here to help you hold, right? Yeah. So we kind of anticipated that most people were wanting to would act sort of to protect the Bitcoin balance. That's what we see. In fact, one of the neat things about the savings account is that we know if somebody's going to be traveling, because we have some users that, for example, live in mountainous areas or don't always have access to a computer. So we say to them, listen, if you're going to be unable to communicate with us for a known period of time, one option we give you is you can basically put a balance on your savings account, and if a margin call happens, we won't bother you. We'll just you pre-authorize us, we draw from, and we top you up, and off you go. A lot of people use that service. I think it's it's a convenience thing more than others, and it's more of a peace of mind thing. But our goal is really to give you all the tools so that you don't have to sell it. I mean, that's really, that's the kind of the whole premise, is that you can maintain them as long as you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So you guys have been expanding a bunch. So like, obviously both of us were in Canada, but you've been I've been seeing you guys are doing regular visits to Latin America. Like, where are you now?
So over Christmas, just before Christmas, we were down at La BitConf in Uruguay. Obviously, being Venezuelan, we're very much in tune with the crypto movement down there, and how people are using Bitcoin to, but like how to essentially protect themselves from inflation and really save and access. And now more so now, at the beginning, the only thing you could do was buy Bitcoin and hold Bitcoin. But now we're seeing a lot of these people access our financial services. Like people are putting money, they're earning, interest on the savings account. They're taking out loans, and interesting in the places like Venezuela. So I've shared some information recently for some research projects that have reached out to us and want to learn more about, how are people using our services down there, and what kind of usage are they giving it. So to give you some examples, so our average deposit in Venezuelan users is $120. Our average loan in Venezuela is $4,000. So what that tells us is that these are real people using, trying to really save some money. It's not some whale out there, trying to play around with some money. It's people that are actually finding Bitcoin and seeing a big breakthrough. So some of the interesting use cases for our loans down there, we had a person who told us that they had actually used their loan to be able to purchase the medicine for their family, because they came into like a tight moment and they didn't want to sell their sats, and they took a loan and bought the medicine. And they love the fact that it was same-day funding. They're like, am I sure I can get this today? We're like, we'll send it today. We're pretty sure it'll get there today. The guy was able to do, what he needed, and that, that's tremendous. And then there's another guy who, was expanding his mining operation. So there's in Mexico, used the loan to create a music festival. So
wow, really?
There's a lot of and we have OTC partners in Mexico that use our services. We have exchange companies that use our services. So it's really all over. The use cases are very broad, but it's fascinating. So LATAM is somewhere where, as a region, we work very closely with. It's where over half of our users are today now. It's been, it's kind of snowballed as far as the growth. And Argentina is a place that we're paying close attention to because of what's happening. We work with Catalina down there, Tech con Catalina, who's an amazing content maker and YouTuber. A bit. So for us, I mean, it's and that's our focus. We're seeing quite a bit of interest from Europe. And we have some really good opportunities in Asia that we're going to be exploring this year as well.
Wow. So you're kind of hitting the globe hard.
Yeah, we try to be as surgical as we can with sort of when we go and we make an effort, but a lot of the outreach that we're getting is just organic now. A lot of people are just coming to us from very different parts, and we're essentially now understanding it's like, okay, well, we were targeting LATAM. We started to get a bunch of clients from Europe, and there's clearly people wanting to use these types of services down there. Let's do more over there, right? And so that's kind of where it's going. And yeah, LATAM is a big focus. Europe and Asia are probably going to be the focus points too later in the year.
Well, that's incredible. It's very interesting to watch kind of the growth of the space, the proliferations of services like you guys building on top of an entirely different monetary base, and also like capitalizing on inefficiencies in our current system, our current monetary system around the world, and allowing people to kind of utilize the release valve that is Bitcoin in very different ways. So I think you're definitely building something that is integral to this, what I hope to be a push towards we'll say hyper Bitcoinization in the coming years. And yeah, so I mean, I guess my last thing would be, where can people go and find yourself, Ledn, everything that they want to look up about, and if you have any other things that you'd like to point people towards?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way is ledn.io. That's our main site. Our Twitter handle is hodl with Ledn, and my personal handle is cryptonomist with an A at the end, so cryptonomista. And I'm pretty active in pretty much everywhere. We have a very neat chat feature on the site for people to ask questions. And yeah, I mean, feel free to hit me up on any one of the channels.
Awesome. Well, that was a great conversation. I'm glad we had it. And thanks again for taking the time to chat with me.
Anytime, Ben.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed everything Mauricio had to say. Let me know what you thought of the conversation in the comments down below. What do you think about proof of reserves? Do you think it should be a standard in this industry? And let me know what you think of custody as a whole and financial services built atop a finite asset like Bitcoin. Now, if you want to help out the show, of course, you can hit up the sponsors down below. Of course, there's Ledn and Rise Wallet. Those links are in the show notes. You can also check out Wasabi Wallet, which is an excellent way to gain some privacy on your Bitcoin. And finally, you can check out NordVPN. This is a program I use regularly on my computer and on my phone. Essentially what it does is it hides your IP address, it encrypts your browsing data, and it has a bunch of other added benefits like unlocking geoblock content. So if you can't access something in your area, you can simply change your country of origin within the app and it will be unlocked for you. So if you click the link down below, there is a deal that you get where it is 70% off. It ends up being $3.49 a month, or you can just head to nordvpn.com and use the code BTC Sessions, all one word, and that will get you the same deal. With that, I will wrap up. Again, thank you guys so much. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you next time for your daily session.